So good morning. Welcome to our second actual online Facebook service here at the First Congregational Church of Swanzey. It's good to see you. I just want to remind you that there happens to be a delay from what I'm presently doing and also from what you're seeing. We appreciate your comments, but that there will actually be a delay in the things that take place. So please, if you have any prayer concerns that you would like to let us know, we'd ask that you would be able to provide those now. We will try to incorporate them in the pastoral prayer that will be taking place later, actually, in our service. Also, there's just a few announcements that I would like to make. One is that faith formation, there are on our church website, which is www.swanzeyucc.org, that there are faith formation activities as well as resources. So if someone would like to, they can have them for their children or for themselves. So today, Kyle, I'd like us to begin our service with the bringing of our light to what wondrous love is this? And as we begin our service today, I just wanted to say thank you for all those that are tuning in presently. Last week, I know that I was very surprised in the fact that we had, I believe, 333 views on what we have done last week, which is far more than reaching what we typically do with the congregation. So if you're watching this right now, not only am I surprised, but I'm encouraged, and we're hoping that this is fulfilling you spiritually in some way this day. So our prayer of awareness today. Holy One and living God, we feel trapped, enclosed, cagey. We may be overwhelmed by the news and the anxiety that it stirs. We wonder if our lives are nothing more than a desolate field strewn with bleached bones, or that the life we once knew is rotting in a tomb. At this time, may we let love be greater than fear. Amen. Now, what we traditionally do in our service at about this point is we pass our peace. We realize that it is different today as there's a virtual congregation. So if you'd like to have comments for people passing the peace that way, you're welcome to do that. But these are some of the words that you traditionally hear. God makes peace within us. Let us claim it. God makes peace between us. Let us share it. May the peace of God be with you. And today, our modern message is going to be based on Ezekiel chapter 37 and John 11. I will not be reading those separate than my message, so they will be as part of the message today. There's dry bones in a desert valley, stinking remains of a friend's corpse. These are not pleasant images, but they are unfortunately part of the life that we live, our world, and the reality we face. Here we are just 2 weeks before Easter, and here in New Hampshire it's kind of a downcast day, rainy, dreary, kind of makes you feel maybe what you feel inside is about the way it looks outside. We're just 2 weeks away from Easter and the promise of new life. On this fifth Sunday of Lent, here we are being confronted by death and decay. Now, today's readings are full of grief, and it's an intense grief. It's full of these tough and barbed questions. There's weeping, and obviously there's disturbing images, some of which I've already referenced. So I want to turn back and go to those readings now and see what there is to be learned. In the reading from the Gospel of John, there's another one of these very, very long stories, which I will summarize and again not read. The public ministry of Jesus is drawing to a close. He is approaching the end, and he knows he's going to be soon facing his own death. And here's a quick retelling of this story. Jesus was a friend to the family of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. Lazarus grew gravely ill, so the sisters sent word to Jesus, "Master, the one you love so very much is sick." After several days, Jesus was able to return to their home in Judea. His disciples feared for him because they knew people there wanted to kill Jesus for what he was saying and doing. Now, remember, Jesus can't take a car or a bus, a train or a plane. Matter of fact, we can't necessarily very much do that right now in our own personal lives. He only has his feet or the occasional beast of burden to carry him. When Jesus finally got there, he found that Lazarus has already been dead for 4 days. Many were visiting Martha and Mary, sympathizing with them over their brother. Martha heard Jesus was in the area and went out to meet him. Martha and Jesus have a conversation about Lazarus' death and the immediacy of the new life Jesus actually brings. The other sister, Mary, learns that Jesus is near and rushes out to meet him. When her sympathizing friends saw Mary run off, they followed her, thinking she was on her way to the tomb to weep there. Mary came to where Jesus was waiting and fell at his feet, saying, "Master, if you had only been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her sobbing and those with her sobbing, he was deeply moved and felt disturbed. He said, "Where did you put him?" "Master, come and see," they said. Now Jesus wept. The friends said, "Look how deeply he loved him." Others among them said, "Well, if he loved them so much, why didn't he do something to keep him from dying? After all, he opened the eyes of a blind man." And something welled up within Jesus again as he arrived at the tomb. It was a simple cave in the hillside with a slab of stone that was just laid against it. Jesus said, "Remove the stone." The sister of the dead man, Martha, said, "Master, by this time there is a stench. He's been dead for 4 days." Jesus looked her in the eyes. "Didn't I tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" Then to the others, "Go ahead and take away the stone." They removed the stone. Jesus raised his eyes to heaven and prayed, "Father, I'm grateful that you have listened to me. I know you always do listen. On account of this crowd gathered here, I've spoken so that they might believe that you sent me." Then he shouted, "Lazarus, come out." And he came out, a cadaver wrapped from head to toe and with a kerchief over his face. Jesus told them, "Unwrap him and let him loose." Now, as I've said before, especially around these stories that tell of extraordinary or miraculous acts, I don't claim the ability to understand or to explain them, and I won't. And I'm not going to attempt to, because whether it is factually or literally happened is not the point to me. I understand these stories symbolically. To me, these stories convey a deeper truth how the Christ, his life and his way can restore us. They let us know that the powers of destruction, demise, and even death do not have the final word. There are several other points, though, in this sacred story that are easily overlooked due to this new life that Lazarus is granted. See, Jesus is not the only one who is active. He's not the only one engaged in this work. Jesus does not remove the stone in front of the tomb. That task is left up to those gathered. They must remove the obstacle obstructing this new life. Others need to take part in God's restoring work for this to happen. And all too often, this, as we know, is no easy task. Like the stone, it can be heavy. It can be awkward. At times, there can be this lingering and unpleasant, this putrefaction, this stench present as the air clears and new life begins again. And then when Jesus calls Lazarus to emerge and come out, who is it that unbinds him? Again, it is those that are gathered and are present, the community that is surrounding him. They unwrap and untie him. They remove his death shroud and let him go free. Now, I wonder by now how many of you are at home, you're feeling trapped, you're feeling isolated, you're feeling lonely. You wonder what's happened to your own life. Again, you wonder if it's been left in a tomb someplace. You don't even know what's taken place. As we've said before, that life that you had several weeks ago, it feels as if it's a dream, as if it's died, or at least that it's stalled. And we're grieving that. We're mourning that. We're realizing the fragility of life. We're realizing that there are things larger than just our everyday routines. And this can either wake us up, but it does it in such a way that is extremely uncomfortable. So my question is, how can you help other people escape this tomb? How can you unwrap other people from the things that they are bound in too? Or what are you bound with that needs to be loosened? We also know when a community goes through a hard time, frustration begins to take place. The sense of unity begins to erode and fracture. Division can take place. One thing can actually chafe against another. Tempers flare. People become despondent and lose hope. Nothing good seems to be left. Ezekiel knows this situation too well. Since our reading comes from the 37th chapter of the book, we miss all that has come before. We gain only this very partial and very myopic view of this very grand scale. We fail to see the prophet's own desperation and the plight of the community to which the story attempts to give hope. Listen, as Ezekiel applies his prophetic vision to the situation. Here begins the reading. God grabbed me. God's Spirit took me up and set me down in the middle of an open plain strewn with bones. He led me around and among them. A lot of bones. There were bones all over the plain, dry bones bleached by the sun. He said to me, "Mortal, can these bones live?" I said, "God, only you know that." So why is this valley full of bones? What caused the visions of death that the community faced? What has brought Ezekiel to this point of near speechlessness and despair? 2,600 years ago, the Babylonians laid siege to Jerusalem. After enduring 2 years of siege warfare, and the other atrocities, including famine and disease that accompany it, Jerusalem, in other words, their holy city, was sacked. The city was destroyed. The holy temple was razed to the ground. Many of the inhabitants are put to the sword. With the ruin of their sacred site and beloved city behind them, survivors were forced to go back to Babylon as captives. They are experiencing a national disaster and a crisis of faith. What is there to be done for a people, for any community that loses hope amidst pain and suffering? Where are the words to help the community find God in the midst of their grief and loss? While many of us read this beautiful passage, we fail to remember it is also a horrifying one. It is horrifying because it calls the reader to remember, to confront, and testify to the devastating events that led to the valley filled with dry bones in the first place. Its beauty, however, manifests itself with the possibility that even in the landscape full of death, a hope for renewed life remains. So let us turn back to Ezekiel's use of poetic language and his prophetic vision. God said to me, "Prophesy over these bones, dry bones, listen to the message of God." God told these dry bones, "Watch this. I'm bringing the breath of life to you, and you'll come to life. I'll attach sinews to you, put meat on your bones, cover you with skin, and breathe life into you. You come alive, and you'll realize that I am God. I prophesied just as I'd been commanded. As I prophesied, there was a sound, and oh, the rustling. The bones moved and came together, bone to bone. I kept watching. Sinews formed, then muscle on the bone, then skin stretched over them. But they had no breath in them. God said to me, "Prophesy to the breath. Prophesy, son of man. Tell the breath, God the Master says, come from the four winds. Come, breathe, breathe." On these slain bodies, breathe life. So I prophesied, just as God commanded me. The breath entered them, and they came alive. They stood up on their feet. And God said to me, "Mortal, these bones are the whole house of Israel. Listen to what they're saying. Our bones are dried up. Our hope is gone. There's nothing left of us. Therefore prophesy, tell them, God says, I'll dig up your graves and bring you out alive, O my people." So what you're hearing here is about a community that's faced this huge and devastating loss. Its people have been slaughtered. Its holy place has been desecrated. The city that represented the cultural and political center of the nation has just been destroyed. It's been wiped off the face of the earth. These survivors are marched off to a foreign land. They're numb. They're dumbstruck. Hopelessness and despair have settled on them. They say, our bones are dried up. Our hope is gone. There's nothing left of us. That's their lament. Now, like Jesus calling into the tomb and urging Lazarus to emerge into new life, God speaks through Ezekiel and calls to the broken people of Israel. Among the graveyard of friends and countrymen's dry bones, among the rubble of the broken temple and blasted dreams, the voice is heard. Do not despair. You will not be lost to the sands of time. All is not lost. These bones will live again. Your country will survive and prosper. New life will flourish again. So we've heard these old stories, 2,000 years old, 2,600 years old. They obviously have something to say about what is happening today in our own lives, in the things that we face. But I want to go back to another time in our region. There's a book. I was looking for something from Swanzey, but I was unable to find that. But I did find something from Keene. It's by David Proper. It's called A History of the First Congregational Church. And he talks from about 100 years ago. And he's talking about the Spanish flu that took place in Keene. On page 165, I'm reading. And again, it's about the Spanish flu. The widespread epidemic of influenza, which affected the whole nation and even closed the doors of this church for a while. Despite an immediate quarantine imposed in expectation of the epidemic already intense, the disease swept through Keene. As many as 100 cases were reported some weeks. Stores closed for lack of clerks. Telephone service was affected by want of operators. And within 10 days of the outbreak, the city's schools were closed. Meetings, including church services, were suspended. And to keep the air clean, all bonfires of leaves were forbidden, while the public was urged to observe strict sanitation and to stay out of crowds. The city hospital quickly filled, and to meet the emergency, a special hospital was set up at Fisk Hall on the campus of Keene Normal School. By October of 1918, the turning point was reached, and although 300 cases of influenza remained in the city, deaths from the illness were less frequent. St. Bernard's Church held an open-air mass, while other churches resumed their programs and services on November 5th. The special hospital was closed. During the 11 weeks of the epidemic, there had been thousands of cases reported and 153 deaths in the city. Some of that is stark news, but the greater news is this: we are still here. If we are smart about what we do, how we interact with others, if we show that loving someone sometimes is staying away, though staying connected to them, of course, but not necessarily physically, that there is something there in the midst of that story from Keene. We know that it came here. The Spanish flu was here 100 years ago. And it did take its toll, but it did not wipe us out. That is something that we're learning also from these stories too, that there is something greater taking place. So let us have faith and hope in that. All communities face times of challenge and hopelessness. During those times, dark clouds roll in. The landscape looks dour, prospects look grim, but something remains calling, these bones can live again. Your community can be restored. And like the ancient Israelites, people must trust that the voice and allow themselves to live and work towards that promise of restoration. Vibrancy can and will return. Life can come back to bones and to bricks. New energy can surge. So today we have read about death and decay. We've heard about Lazarus' stinking corpse and the dry bones of a broken nation. But what makes these stories sacred is the realization of restoration and new life. These communities transformed their situation by reconnecting and working with what was truly divine. They believed that a new day was possible and worked towards it by removing obstacles and freeing those bound and captive. As vibrancy and life return to these communities, people were called by the promise that they too can be transformed and restored. So this day, may we listen to the voice that always tells us that the dry bones of our lives can live again. May we promise to make room for those that need to be restored. And may we welcome others with the grace and love that was first shown to us. Amen. So at this time, we traditionally do joys and concerns as part of our worship service. Again, I just wanted to take a look at the iPad to make sure there wasn't anything that was pressing that people have submitted. So there are a few things that people have placed that they would like to have prayed for. One is for those that are still working, that they may stay healthy and that they may stay safe. And also we know that at least one of our congregants has asked that two brothers would be remembered who both have multiple health concerns but also have the virus right now as we speak. So at this time, let's turn our hearts, our minds, the very center of ourselves to that which has given us life. Let us go there now in prayer. Holy One and living God, we are thankful that there are stories of our past because they help us understand our present and help us understand more so that there is a future. But we have to be wise. Sometimes we just have to ride out what is here. But sometimes we have to take an active stance too and remove obstacles. Remove things that are in the way of new life and new possibility. So during this difficult time, may we find the better angels of our nature. May we reach out in the ways that are safe. Speaking with others by electronic means, or if a neighbor needs help, finding ways to do that, but making sure that both of you remain safe. We also lift up the prayers of these people for brothers and others that have this virus, but the many people that are in the midst of difficulties and tragedies and grief in their own lives. We realize we feel as if our world's been turned upside down. The life that we had just several weeks ago feels so very different. People feel isolated. Please, that they have patience, may they have tolerance and endurance, and may they be kind to themselves as well. Now in the silence of your own selves, we'd ask that you would lift up those things that you're thankful for and grateful for. But we also know that there is darkness in the world, as well as in our own selves. And we would ask that love and light would be born there as well. Abba. We know that Jesus called you this, and it's something like Papa or Father. But as always, we know this is only a place to begin, for our brains cannot conceptualize truly what the divine is. We know that you're within others, but you're within our very own selves as well, deeper than what we can even consciously understand. We thank you for your presence, but we thank you also for this notion of regeneration and restoration, that new life can even be found in the darkest of places, in the midst of the dry bones in the tombs of our very own lives. Amen. So one of the things that we do now is we traditionally go and we take an offering. We just want to let you know that there are expenses for the church. They continue. And I believe, Kyle, have you put something on about PayPal this time?
Yeah, there's in the comment section.
Okay.
Also on our website.
So in the comment section, that there is the ability to give electronically if you would like via PayPal. You can also do that from our website too. Thank you for the things that you've done. Again, it was amazing to us that we had 333 views of last week's video. We also surprisingly brought in almost $400 via PayPal. So that is just another way that people can give if they so choose. So we end our service with Let There Be Peace on Earth. And I'm going to ask Kyle to play that now as I make sure that our light, though will still remain within us, that it will be leaving the sanctuary for now. So if you're still with us, I just wanted to let you know we also have plans for a Maundy, Thursday service, which will be taking place April 9th. That will be at 7 o'clock at night. So be kind, be safe, and be blessed.